All right. Hey, everybody. Morning. My name's Nathan Smith, and I'm the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thanks so much for joining me for Microsoft Excel Part 2, Formulas and Charts. Glad to have you here. This is a fun. Okay. Microphone weirdness. Hang on just a second. Okay, there we go. Back in business, I think. Okay, cool. So I hope you get a lot out of this, and I'm glad you're here. Before we get things rolling, a couple of quick preliminary things. First of all, of course, as always, check out the schedule of the live events that we've got going on by heading over to accals.org and moving your mouse over events and clicking on Find an Event Online. And of course, you can find more technology classes by moving your mouse over events again, and this time clicking on technology classes in that same menu. Other things, the main thing, of course, as I mentioned last week, and as I mentioned at the beginning of all my classes, one of the most important things to say is, if you have questions, please speak up and ask those questions. I am not at all concerned about whether a question is kind of a silly or obvious one to someone, because, we all have different levels of comfort with technology. We all have different levels of skill with Excel or with computers in general, things like that. So I'm never in the business of judging that one way or another. The goal of a technology class is for you to learn useful things about technology. So if that's happening, then we're good. Just ask those questions and we'll make sure that they get tackled. Let's see. So make sure that, if you have questions, make sure and ask them. How would you do that? Well, at the bottom of your window, if you're joining me here in Zoom, is a little speech bubble that says chat. You can click on that and you'll get the little chat box, usually out to the side, and you can type in questions and send them on. That is a good way to do that. If you're joining me in Zoom, but you're on a mobile device, tap the middle of the screen, look in the corner for a button that says more, tap on that, tap chat in that menu, and then you should see, you should be able to type in your message there. If you're having trouble with or if you are watching via live stream, then you can head over, on Facebook, you can just use the comments to ask your questions, just like you'd comment on any other post on Facebook. Just drop your question in there and I'll be able to see it. If you're joining me via YouTube, then you'll want to look out to the side. If you're on a computer, if you're on a mobile device, you'll want to look down below the video, and you might have to tap on something to see the live chat, but there should be something that says live chat. You should be able to type questions in there and send them on to me. So make sure you use those whenever you have questions, and we'll make sure that they get addressed. Okay, so, oh yeah, and also if there are technical problems, please let me know about that as well. Hopefully I will be able to identify them quickly on my own, and I'll notice right away that something's gone wrong. But sometimes that doesn't happen because, technology sometimes malfunctions, and it doesn't always let you know that it's malfunctioning beforehand. So if there's a technical problem that you notice, if my screen sharing freezes up, if my microphone cuts out, if my video goes away and I haven't said I'm going to turn off my camera for a sec or whatever, then please do let me know, so that way I can make sure that that gets handled efficiently, and we don't have to use a bunch of our time on me talking into a muted microphone or something like that. That's never a good thing. So let's go ahead and dive in. One more time, I'll go ahead and put in the chat and in comments and so forth the link to the example file. If you're never obligated to follow along with the examples, if you want to just watch and listen, that's perfectly fine. Then you should be able to do that. But of course, if you want to follow along, you're welcome to. Actually, hang on just a moment. Something weird is going wrong. Give me just a second, and I'll be and we'll get this sorted out, and then we'll get rolling. Oh, let me go ahead and drop that link in the chat. Sorry, and then we will. That way, y'all can be doing that, and I can fix the problem on this end, and then we'll be ready to get going here. All right, there's that. Put it in the live stream. All right. All right, excuse me. Let's get going. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to grab that example file if you're going to be following along. Let me go ahead and fire up the screen sharing. And there we have it. Okay, great. So you should have something like this. Again, you'll want to go up to the top here and click on Enable Editing. So that way you can actually make changes. To the file. Otherwise, you'll be good to go. Let's see. All right, give me one more moment. Things are just being weird here. Okay, cool. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive into this. Before we get into the all the details of the of uh, of this. Oh, okay, yeah, someone's asking me to zoom in. That is a good idea. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so we can see the sheet a little more clearly there. Okay, good. So in the example file, you should have something like this. We're going to talk just briefly about, we're going to do a little refresher here. So that way everyone is on the same page and remember some of our terminology, because that's always a little tricky. Ideally you've slept at least 7 times since the last class. So we want to make sure that you are, you're back up to speed, and you can follow along well during the rest of the class. So let's talk terms just a little bit here. One term that I want to refresh everyone's memory on is a range. So a range is a group of cells that are together. They're either that either form a line like this or like this, or sort of a box. There can't be any gaps in between them. So if you had all these cells selected except for, say, cell H9 here or something, then that's not a range. But this entire thing is a range. This is a range F6 to K18. And the way that you write that is like this: F6 colon, colon K18, just like that. So a colon, make sure it's not a semicolon. You'll have to hold shift in order to get a colon rather than a semicolon. So just make sure that it is actually a colon. And Excel, as we're writing our formulas, it's going to color code for us a good deal. So you'll get a lot of practice in, and you'll be able to know pretty quickly whether it's working correctly or not. So that's a range of cells. Let's also talk about something, or a couple of terms that we're going to be using a lot during this session, which is formulas and functions. So formulas are basically a set of instructions that Excel can follow in order to do some sort of calculation or figure something out for you, usually using information that's outside of the formula. So, for example, the total income number that we calculated at the very end of last week's session and things like that. What you'll want to do is you'll want to, when you write a formula, like I said, you're basically giving it instructions. You're telling it, okay, here's a thing that you need to, here's a thing that I want you to figure out. The formulas have a few little rules. One is they need to start with an equal sign. So you have to use an equal sign to start off the formula, and then and you always want to start a formula with an equal sign. If you write a formula that's lovely, where everything is great, it looks perfect in every way, but you don't put an equal sign at the beginning, then it's not going to work. Excel is not going to interpret it as a formula, and so you'll have a problem. You want to make sure that you start out with you start everything out with a formula, or everything that is a formula, you want to start out using an equal sign. Okay, so let me see here. You'll also want to, okay. Actually, sorry, y'all. Give me just one more moment. There's kind of a strange situation that's cropping up here. I will be right back. Okay, so sorry about that. I do think we've got it sorted this time. Woo, crazy. Things are happening. Things are happening. Okay. All right. Um, so start off a formula with an equal sign. And then what you're going to do most of the time is you're going to build the formula using primarily what are known as functions. I like to call functions the building blocks of formulas. A function is like a trick that Excel already knows how to do. So if you think about, say, a dog, for example, if you have a dog and that dog has learned some tricks, then you might say, Rover sit, and he sits down, or Rover come, and he comes to wherever you are, or whatever. You don't have to explain to Rover over and over again, like, okay, these are the steps you take to sit, or this is how you come, or this is what I mean when I say heel. Rover learns it, he's got it down, and so you can just you can just say the word and he does it. So Excel kind of works the same way with functions. Functions are the building blocks of formulas, and so they will, Excel, you can use them to create a formula that will that'll do a lot of different things, adding and subtracting, or calculating an average, or all sorts of stuff. Some of which we'll talk about a little later on. If you ever wonder whether there's a function for something, what you can do is click the formulas tab up at the top here, and then look over here on the side. You'll see all these little icons, and they divide up all the functions into different categories, like financial, logical, time and date, lookup and reference, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're like, well, I wonder if there's one that can do this sort of thing with dates, you can click on the time and date, and then you can see what all of them are. And when you move your mouse over it, it'll actually give you a little description, of what it does. And you can even click tell me more, and it'll take you to a more detailed description of what that function does and how to use it. That's because most of us aren't going to be able to remember all the functions. And Excel, thankfully, doesn't expect you to. It expects that you will do other things with your life other than memorize Excel functions. And so, so they're all right here in what's called the function library for us to look up when we don't remember what they are. So, what you'll need to do, so we can use those functions to build our formulas. Two additional bits of information about formulas. So whenever you write a formula, you'll want to write the name of the formula and then add parentheses right next to the name of the function, excuse me. You'll want to write parentheses right next to the name of the function. And then inside the parentheses, usually you're going to have what are called arguments. Those are the pieces of information that the function is going to work with. And so we'll talk a lot more about that as we move forward, but I just want to put that terminology on your radar. The other key thing that I want to remind you about is sheets. So, as I mentioned last week, an Excel file, even though Excel is a spreadsheet program, an Excel file is not called a spreadsheet, it's called a workbook. And the reason for that is that Just like a book can contain multiple pages with different pieces of information on it, an Excel workbook can contain multiple spreadsheets with different pieces of information on them. And usually we just call them sheets. So this example file has a number of sheets for different examples. There's the basic math sheet, the copy, paste, and autofill sheet, the breakout sessions sheet, and so on and so forth. And if I click on one, it'll switch over to them. If I wanted to create a new one, I would click the plus, but I don't really need to do that right now. So that's the that's how that works. All right, so let's go ahead and dive back in, and we'll start out with the example that we started with, or that we ended with last week. So that way we can kind of jump off from there. Up here at the top in cell C2, I've already clicked there in C2. And now what I need to do is I'm gonna write again the formula that we did at the end of last week. So I've clicked in cell C2, and now I'm going to click in the formula bar up at the top here. Now, again, you don't have to write your formulas in the formula bar, but if you do, it's going to be a lot easier to correct mistakes when, not if, but when you make them, because goodness knows all of us make mistakes. So when you make mistakes, it'll be easier to correct them if you're working in the formula bar rather than down here in the cell itself. So I've clicked up here to put my little blinking cursor in the formula bar, and this microphone is going to is gonna drive me a little nuts today. Okay, so I've written out, I've got my cursor up in the formula bar up here at the top, and I'm going to start typing my formula. The first thing I need, of course, is an equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. So I'll type equal sign, and then I'll do sum, S-U-M. So not sum as in some chickens, but sum as in the answer to an addition problem, such as you might do in elementary school. So sum, S-U-M, and then I'm going to open a set of parentheses. So I'm going to hold shift while pressing 9 on my keyboard, shift 9. When I do that, I should get a left parenthesis. Down here at the bottom, by the way, when I was typing in the word sum, you'll notice it gives me suggestions of different functions that I might be interested in using here. There's sum if, s, sum product, d sum, im sum, series sum. So there's a ton of different functions with the word sum in their name. We're just going to use the plain sum function though. And once I add my left parenthesis there, you'll notice now I get a little hint system, basically, is what I like to call it. So I have sum, parenthesis, and then it says number 1 in bold here, comma, and then number 2 in square brackets, comma, and then ... and then my right parenthesis. Whenever you have a left parenthesis in your formula, you've got to have a right parenthesis as well, 100% of the time. So make sure that whenever you open a set of parentheses, you always close it. Sometimes you'll have multiple parentheses right next to each other because there are sets of parentheses inside of other ones. And that's okay. That's how formulas work in Excel. So I've typed sum, S-U-M, I've opened my set of parentheses, and now inside of the parentheses for the sum function, I'm going to go C4 colon and then C100. So C4 colon C100, and I'll close my parentheses right there. So sum, left parenthesis, C4 colon C100, close the parentheses. And you'll notice C4 to C100 is blue up here at the top. And when I scroll down, I've got cells C4 to C100 highlighted in blue down at the bottom. So I know I'm pointing to the right group of cells. Now there's some empty cells down here, and we'll talk about that in just a sec. But for now, let's go ahead and just confirm what we've typed in our cell, lock in our formula here. So I'll press enter. And there we go. Our total income number, $28,727.68. So what I've done in this formula is I've said, so I've got the equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. I've got the sum function right here. So I'm saying Excel add, but of course, Excel needs some information, needs some numbers that it's going to be working with in order to add. So I'm going to put, what I'm going to do is, in this case, put a reference to a range of cells right here in that formula bar. So I've got, I've got C4 to C100. And because I'm putting it inside of the sum function, inside those parentheses, I'm telling Excel, okay, these are the numbers that I want to add. Of course, I'm closing the parentheses because if you have a left one, you've got to have a right one. And then it just takes all the numbers here and adds them together. Now, of course, these cells down here don't have anything in them. So why would I include them in the formula? Why wouldn't I just say C4 to C29? Well, the answer is that if I wanted to add additional rows of data at some point, doing it this way makes it super duper easy. As long as I don't have 90, as long as I don't get above like 97, people on my list, then I can just keep adding rows with additional data down here as much as I want. And the formula will automatically take it into account. Like if I come down here, so right now we've got $28,727.68. If I come down here and just add $1,000 even, now it's gone up to $29,727.68. So that makes it easier to add data to my sheet and just have it incorporated in this total without having to worry about changing the formula. Because of course, if I add C4 to C29, then if I add something in rows or in cell C30, then I've got to rewrite my formula to accommodate that. That's also, by the way, why I have this up at the top instead of down at the bottom, like you would expect if this was on paper. If this were on paper, you'd have all of the individual income numbers. And then at the very bottom of the page, you'd probably have like a total cell somewhere, near the very bottom of the sheet. But in this case, because this is on a computer, it makes it a lot easier to have it at the top because, as I said, number one, I can add additional rows of data to this with no problem. If I'm printing it out on a piece of paper, then I've already kind of locked in the data that I have so far. And if I'm going to print it again, then I'm going to kind of reformat things to print the new version that has additional data in it. But in this case, because I'm not really worried about printing it, at least not right now, I can put it up here and then I can just add additional rows of data as I need to. And also, I don't have to scroll down in order to see the total. So it just makes it easier on me to just look and see at a glance what my total is. So all of that is really convenient. And that's why this is up at the top. And that's also why this is C4 to C100 rather than C4 to C29. So that's how I calculate my income number there. Let's calculate some expenses. This will be pretty easy now that we've done the income number. So we have all our expenses down here in column D. What I need to do, I'm going to select cell D2 with my mouse, come up to the top and click in the formula bar. I'm going to hit the equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And then again, I'm going to use the sum function, SUM, and hit Shift 9 to open a set of parentheses. Then again, I'm prompted by my hint system here. I need to put a number inside these parentheses or a set of numbers. So I'm going to go D4 colon D100. And then I'll close my parentheses again. So basically the same formula, except I wrote C or D instead of C over here. I can press enter or I can click the little check mark right here. And I get $18,896.13. So that's the total expenses my salespeople have incurred. And this is the total income. So we're coming out ahead at least. But I want to see exactly how far ahead we're coming out. So over here on the right-hand side, where it says net total, I can do this a couple of different ways. One of those ways is to kind of rely on these numbers right here. So what I'm going to do is click. So I've got cell E2 selected. I'm going to click in the formula bar, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula, use that sum function once again. So I'll type SUM for sum. I'll open a set of parentheses, Shift 9. And then inside here, instead of a range of cells, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put C2, which is the cell with the total income number in there, comma, and then negative sign D2. And then close my parentheses, so Shift 0. So C2 and then negative D2, those are being added together. So I'm converting this 18,000 and some odd dollars into a negative number and adding it to the income number. Of course, adding a negative number is the same as subtracting. And so that totally works. If I hit the check mark or I press enter, $9,831.55 is my net total. Okay, so far so good. We've done we've done a few different versions of this sum function. Let's go ahead and talk about some other basic math functions. Well, let's talk about the sum function just a little bit more because it's a really good example to start with. And we'll talk about some other basic math functions as well. So I'm just going to come out here to the side and I'm going to start typing in some numbers. It doesn't matter if you have the same numbers as I do, really. I'm just going to put some in here. Okay, cool. All right, there we go. Okay, so I've got some numbers and I'm going to just put a, just for readability, I'm going to put a little, let's see, what's a good way to do this? Let's just change this cell formatting here. So I'm going to come up here. I could use one of these options, but I can actually change the style of the cell up here using these little boxes. So I'll just make it green by clicking this good box right up here at the top. So that way this is going to be the total rather than being a part of this data set, a part of this list of numbers here. Okay, so I've got that. What I'm going to do is I've clicked to select this cell that I'm going to put my my results in for my various math operations. I'm going to click in the formula bar, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula, and then I'm going to type sum, SUM, open a set of parentheses, Shift 9, and then, okay, if I wanted to add all these together, y'all can probably guess what we would do. We would go H4 colon H 12. It's hard to eyeball those things sometimes. So H4 to H12, H4 colon H12. So that's the range of cells that I have selected. I'm going to close my parentheses right here. And if I press enter or hit the check mark or whatever, 369 is the total of all these numbers here. Let's say that I only want to add the single digit numbers though. To do that, what I'm going to do is I've got the cell selected here. I'm going to come back up and click in the formula bar again, and I'm going to edit my formula here. So I have H4 colon, and I'm going to I need to get rid of the colon too. I'm going to leave this H4 because of course the first single digit number here is 6. But I'm going to put a comma. When I put the comma, you'll notice that my hint system down here changed. Before the comma, I had number 1 in bold, comma, number 2 in square brackets, comma, dot, dot, dot. If I hit the comma, or if I add a comma in there, now I get number 1 not in bold, number 2 in brackets, in bold, comma, number 3 in square brackets as well, and then a comma, dot, dot, dot. So what this is telling me is essentially I can keep adding numbers or sets of numbers to be added pretty much as I want. So I could do the rest of it a couple of different ways. One option would be to go H8 colon H10 like this. So H8 colon H10, that's going to give me this range of cells. So I've got one individual cell, a comma, and then a range of cells here, from H8 to H10. Or I can go H8, comma, H9, comma, H10 and close the parentheses there. And each one is color coded in a different way. Technically, what's happening here is, you heard me mention a moment ago, arguments. So what's happening here is each cell, since they're being pointed out individually, is considered a separate argument. So argument number 1, or number 1, as the hint system would have it here, is H6. Argument number 2 is H8. Argument number 3 is H9, and argument number 4 is H10 right here. You'll see number 4 in square brackets, it's highlighted. The square brackets down here tell me that this is optional. I only need one number or set of numbers in order for the sum function to work. But I can add more, and that's what the dot, dot, dot tells me. And of course, the commas tell me that these are all separate arguments, separate pieces of information as far as Excel is concerned. If I close my parentheses, press enter, the total of all the single digit numbers is 20. So that's 6 plus 2 is 8, plus 5 is 13, plus 7 is 20. Yep, there we go. We got it. So in this case, at least you can do any combination of ranges, individual cells. You could do 2 different ranges that are completely separate from each other, both as arguments for the sum function. So you can do this a lot of different ways. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to cancel. And let's go ahead and clear out this cell. I can, as long as I'm not editing it, so I don't have the little blinking cursor here, up here, or down here. As long as I'm not editing it, then I can just select the cell, press delete on my keyboard, and that will clear out the contents of the cell. Again, it doesn't change the formatting, so it'll still be green like that, but it does delete the actual information stored inside the cell. Okay, so the next thing, let's see, we'll go ahead and zoom a little bit more. The next basic math formula, function that I'm going to show you is the product function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply all of these together. So if I go equal sign, I've got the cell selected. I'm going to click in the formula bar. I'm going to hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And then instead of sum, like we've been doing, I'm going to type product. And the product is the answer to a multiplication problem, something times something. So I'll type the word product. I'll open a set of parentheses, Shift 9. And then again, I'm being prompted number 1, number 2 in square brackets, comma, dot, dot, dot. So inside of these parentheses, I just want to give it a number, a set of numbers, or, several cells, or just one, I guess, to multiply together. So I'll go H4 colon H12, close my parentheses, Shift 0. When I hit enter, gives me an extremely long number. In fact, so long that it shortened it significantly using this other notation. It's like, okay. There we go. Yeah. So anyway, a lot of it's a very large number. And then what I'm gonna so that's too much. That's not what I need. Let's say that I do want to multiply the single digit numbers together. Again, I can do it pretty much the same way as the sum function. So I've got H4. I'll click up here to edit, just do backspace a little bit, and I'll keep product or equal sign product left parenthesis H4. Then I'll do comma. And again, I can do H8 colon H10. So I can refer to these three cells as a range. And I'll close my parentheses, shift 0. Press enter. And 420 seems to be the answer. Then I could change that to be H8, H9, comma, H10, and I'll get the same thing if I close my parentheses. Yep, same answer. So I can use 4 arguments here, or I can use 2. The first argument is H4, which is by itself. The second argument is, or if I'm doing 2 arguments, the second is the range of cells, H8 to H10. Or if I'm doing 4, then I can point to each cell individually. And if I wanted to add another one, then I could come back up to the formula and go H13. Close my parentheses. And 2100. There we go. Excellent. So that's how you use the product function. It works very similarly to the sum function. The only difference is it multiplies rather than adds. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about another basic math function, and that is the excuse me. Wow, I'm sleepy this morning. Okay, there we go. It's the quotient function. So if you're following the pattern, you may not be surprised to learn that the quotient is the answer to a division problem in the way that the sum is the answer to an addition problem, or the product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So I'm going to select the cell H3 here, hit delete on my keyboard to clear out the information inside it. Go back up to my formula bar, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula, and then type the word quotient, Q-U-O-T-I-E-N-T. I'll open a set of parentheses, shift 9 to do the left parenthesis. And then you'll notice down here with my hint system, rather than telling me, rather than giving me number 1, number 2, etc., and there are no square brackets here, so nothing's optional. We need exactly 2 arguments. The first one is the numerator, the number being divided. And the second is the denominator, the number being divided by. So, so we need exactly those. We need 1 comma in between them. Otherwise, the function is not going to work, because that's how division works. You can't divide 3 numbers. That's not a thing. And you can't divide 1 number. It has to be 1 number divided by another number. So let's say we want to take our, let's say we want to take 87 here, and we want to divide it by the 7. So what I'm going to do is, so 87 is in cell H5. Nope, excuse me, H6. I'm going to put a comma here. That's my first, come on now. Can't type today. That's my first argument, H6 right there. Then I'm going to go H10, which is where the 7 is. Then I'm going to close my parentheses, H6, comma, H10. So H6, that's the 87, divided by 7, which is in H10. I'll hit enter, and I get 12. Now, some of you who are doing the math in your head may be a little surprised that this is our answer, because in one sense, 87 divided by 7 is definitely not 12. 87 divided by, or excuse me, 7 times 12 is actually just going to be 84. So you would have, if you were doing this in fourth grade or whatever, you would have 87 in the little house. You'd have 7 outside the little house, and at the top you would write 12, but then you would put R3 for the remaining 3 that you don't, or that don't divide out evenly. If you are doing this as a decimal calculation, well, then you would get you'd get 12 point something, I don't know, close to 12.5, a little under, I think. So this is not going to give you that kind of answer. This is not a decimal answer or a fraction. It's just going to give you the whole number answer to your whatever you're having it divide. Sometimes that's the best way to go. If I had a pile of 87 chicken nuggets and I was dividing them up into 12 boxes, then I would end up with 7 nuggets in each box and 3 nuggets sitting outside the boxes that wouldn't go there. So, or that wouldn't go in any particular box. So in that situation, I want to know, okay, I'm going to get, I'm going to get 7 boxes out of this or whatever. In other cases, though, you do want the decimal answer. And so in that situation, you have to do the division problem a little bit differently. Rather than equal sign quotient H6 comma H10, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in the cell, click in the formula bar, and I'm going to make some changes here. I'm going to backspace and get rid of the parenthesis there. I'm going to go in between the H6 and H10, and I'm going to add a forward slash. Now make sure it's a forward slash. That's the one that shares a key with the question mark. Or if you have a little 10 key number pad on the right hand side of your keyboard like I do, then the slash is just above the 8 key. So you need a forward slash, not a backslash, which is the one that's above enter. And then I'm just going to backspace the parenthesis and all of this, and the word quotient. So I have equal sign H6 slash H10. I'll press enter on my keyboard. And now I get the decimal answer, 12.42857,143. Okay, I don't feel so bad about not having done that math in my head. So you can, so you've got, so this is the decimal answer to this same division problem, 87 divided by 7. So if you need that more precise answer, then use this method to divide rather than quotient function. The quotient function will give you the whole number answer and just ignore any remainder. So depending on what you want to do, this is the way to do it. You can also do other types of basic math this way. The sum function is really useful for learning when you're just starting out with formulas, but you can do a lot of basic math this way as well. If I wanted to add 87 to 7, I'll actually just backspace the slash there and add a plus sign. When I hit enter on my keyboard, 94 is the total when I add 87 and 7. Okay, if I click the cell again and go back up here, I'm going to hit backspace and put a minus sign there. H6, or 87 minus 7, which is an H10. That gives me 80, of course. And then if I want to add, and then if I want to multiply them, I'm going to remove the minus sign, and I'm going to put an asterisk, the little star, in there instead. I'll press enter one more time, and I get 609. That's what 87 times 7 is. So you can do a lot of basic math that way. Not every math problem will work with these types of things, but a lot of them will. But I definitely I definitely want to show you how this works, how a lot of this works with the sum function as well, because it's a really easy way to start to understand how functions work. One last basic math function to show you. We're going to move on to one other example up here, and then we're going to move on to a different topic that's really useful. Okay, so the one other basic math function that I'm going to show you is the average function. Now, what I'm going to do is rather than deal with these numbers, I'm actually going to find out the average of our total income numbers over here. So I'm just going to pick a different cell to work in. Doesn't really matter which. Click in that cell, click in the formula bar, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And then I'm going to go average, open my set of parentheses, so shift 9. And then I'm going to go C4 colon C100, just like we did earlier. Close my parentheses, shift 0, and press enter. So our average of our income numbers here is $1,104.91. Now, again, I incorporated all of these cells down to cell C100. Those of you who are familiar with how averages work might notice that there could be a problem here, because if someone's because when you do an average, what you do is you add all the numbers together and then you divide it by the number of numbers you added together. So if somebody's number is 0, obviously that's going to bring down the average. But in this case, so a lot of times Excel does treat a blank cell as a 0. But in this particular case, it doesn't. So I want to point that out to you because it's worth paying attention to when Excel treats a blank cell as a 0, and when it's just a blank cell, it's a nothing, what we call a null value in computer world. And in the case of average, it's a null, it's nothing, not even 0, because 0 is a specific value. And I can show you that that's the case, because right now we have $1,104.91 as our average. If I come down here and I add 0 to the next row, now it's down to $1,063.99. So I know that I'm getting that this is actually the average of the numbers that exist here. Now, of course, on the other hand, if you had a new person and you put their information in here, but they haven't brought in any income yet, you're going to have to put a 0 there. Otherwise, the average won't be calculated correctly. So just be mindful of when blank cells represent or count as a 0, and when blank cells count as actually nothing. And you may have to experiment a little bit to find out when that's the case. And of course, you can always look it up. If you were like, well, does the average function count zeros? You can go into math and trig here, find average. Well, where is it? Maybe it's not there. That's interesting. Okay, it's somewhere in here. Anyway, financial. Oh, here we go. Statistical. There it is. Average. And I could come down here and click tell me more, and it'll give me some specific details about that function. Okay, so last example on this sheet. Let's say that I want to calculate this net total, but I don't want to use these pre-existing numbers. Let's say that this didn't exist, or that there was some important information in these cells, and or I just didn't want to show my work. I just want to have the net total here. What I can do is I can write the formula a little bit differently. So I'm going to select cell E2 here. I'm going to press delete to go ahead and clear it all out. And then I'm going to use one formula to calculate the whole shebang and get a net total here. The way I'm going to do that is I've got the cell selected. I'm going to come up here, click in the formula bar, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula, type the word sum, S-U-M, open a set of parentheses. And then inside this set of parentheses, rather than putting the address of a cell or a plain number, which I could also do in here, instead, I'm going to I'm going to type the word sum again. and I'm going to open another set of parentheses. Now you'll notice this time the second set of parentheses is color coded red. So that tells me that this is a second set of parentheses. It doesn't go with the first parenthesis, and I'm going to have to close this out with another red parenthesis on the other side. Inside of this sum function, I'm going to go C4 colon C100, just like I did before. And then I'm going to close that inner set of parentheses, the red ones. And you'll notice that's color-coded red as well. Then I'll put a comma. And then I'm going to put a negative sign as well. And I'm going to type sum again, one more time, open yet another set of parentheses. And this time I'll go D4 colon D100. Now I've got to close my red parentheses, and I've got to close the black parentheses that go with the original sum function. So here's what's happening in this version of the formula. Well, let me actually just show you really quick. If I hit the check mark, I get the exact same amount as I did by subtracting this one from this one. So here's what's happening in this formula. With math, you always start with the inner parts with inner parentheses and work outward. So the first thing that's happening here is C4 to C100 is being calculated. So we're getting the total income number using this sum function right here. Then this sum function over here also goes into effect, and we're calculating the total expenses. Then I have the negative sign. That is the expense number that we got from the sum of D4 to D100 is just turned negative. Then I'm working with the original sum function here on the outside. And that takes the results of this function that added up my income number, the results of my expenses number, which is now negative, and it adds them together. So I've actually got functions inside of functions here. You can kind of nest them together like those little Russian nesting dolls, and you can get kind of a multi-step formula that does several things in one go. And that's exactly what we've got here. So I just wanted to show you that you can put a function inside of another function. If you're doing multiple steps, a lot of times you'll need to do that. So I just want you to know that that exists. All right. What questions do y'all have about any of that stuff before we move on to our next set of examples, a different topic a little bit? All right, I don't see anything so far. If you're typing a question, keep typing, and but we'll go ahead and click on copy paste and autofill sheet down here. By the way, if you're editing your formula, if you have the little blinking cursor on here, if you're editing the formula, make sure you don't click on the name of the sheet before you go to before you get out of here. So you could press enter, you could hit escape to revert your cell back to what it was before. But if you're editing, if you're in the middle of editing a formula while you click on a sheet down here at the bottom, then it's going to do something really weird. And it's not worth getting into right now, but yeah, make sure you're not editing the formula before you move on. Okay. So a couple of questions here. What error messages can you get? The most common error message that I see with this is something like this. We found a typo in your formula and try to correct it. Do you want to accept this correction? So I deleted the last parenthesis there. It's saying you probably needed a parenthesis here. I can hit yes, and then it's all good. But there's some other stuff that can happen depending on if you mistype some of this or leave out some of the punctuation and that sort of thing. So it just depends on what kind of mistake you make. Believe me, I made all of them. But but if it can't figure out what you're trying to do, then it'll give you a more general error message like there's something wrong with this formula kind of thing. Or you might get a little NA or an error inside, an error sort of symbol inside the cell. Another question was, can you continue the formula to get the average? This formula, well, I'm not sure how you would incorporate the average into this since it's only one number you're coming up with ultimately. I mean, you could replace this with averages and get the average net total for each individual salesperson. So you could replace like these two inner sum functions with average instead. Or you could, you could also, I mean, you can also get a net total if you use a similar type of formula. You could get a net total for each of these, for each of the salespeople, and you could have an average net total by combining all of those. So yeah, that would be a couple of ways you could do that. If that's not quite what you're getting at, let me know kind of what you're envisioning, and we can definitely talk about that. Great questions though, y'all. Thank you. So the copy, paste, and autofill sheet. Let's pop over here and let's take a look at this example. Okay. In this example, what I'm doing is kind of keeping a running balance here. So I've got, again, an income number and an expenses number. And this time each row is a month, January, February, March. I didn't fill in the rest of the month names. You'll see why in a minute. And I've got a formula calculating my balance here. So the first formula is pretty easy. We've got the sum function here. We've got B2, comma, negative C2. So I'm taking B2, my income number for January, and I'm just subtracting, C2, my expense number for January. 84 minus 54 is $30 even. On this row, though, I've got to get a little more complicated because in addition to the income minus the expenses, I also need to incorporate the previous balance that I had up here, this $30. So this formula is B3, my income number from February, minus C3, my income or my expenses number from February, plus D2 up here, my balance, my previous balance from January. And I want to basically continue this on down for the whole year, right? So I could click here and I could rewrite the formula, this time going the sum of B3 negative, or excuse me, the sum of C3 negative, the sum of C4 negative D, or, oh my goodness. Okay. So B4, change this to C4 and change this to D3. Sorry, y'all. So I could change it in that, or I could rewrite the formula in that way down on row 4. That would kind of work. I mean, that would be fine. That would work. But then I'd have to do it again on row 5 and row 6 and so on. So that'd be pretty tedious. But there's an easier way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this cell with my formula in it. Now I want to make sure I'm not editing. So I want to make sure there's no blinking cursor here. There's no color coding down here. And there's no blinking cursor over here in the actual cell D3. I'm going to hit escape or click the little X to cancel. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this cell. 2 different ways to do it. Number 1, I can come up here and click the word copy or the little icon with the 2 pages, and that will copy it. And you'll notice the little dotted lines here. Or the way that I usually prefer to do it is to use the keyboard. I can hold Control CTRL at the bottom left of my keyboard and press, while I'm holding Control, press C, Control C for copy, which works not only in Excel, but you can copy, Control C will allow you to copy in almost any program that supports copy and paste in all of Windows. And if you're on a Mac, all you have to do is use Command C rather than Control C. So it's super duper easy. That's honestly saves you a lot of hassle. You don't have to look for copy and paste on the screen. Super handy, particularly when you're starting with a new program. Pretty much always works. So Control C, that's my copy keyboard shortcut. I've copied this cell, and now what I'm going to do is come down here, and not only can I could I copy it or could I paste it into cell D4 here, I can actually select all of these cells. So I'm going to select them all and I'm going to paste them in. Again, 2 ways to do this. Option number 1, click the icon of the clipboard with the little page next to it, and that will paste it in. Or use my trick, which is press the keyboard shortcut, Control V. So hold Control CTRL at the bottom of your keyboard while pressing V as in Victor, and that will paste it in. Now, one thing you don't want to do, because it would be pretty confusing, is click on the word paste or the little arrow down here. What that's going to do is give you this whole big menu with a bazillion different paste options, and it gets pretty complicated. Now, I have to say, it's pretty cool that they have all these options, and they do a ton of actually pretty useful stuff. We just don't have time to cover it in class. That is definitely something I recommend looking into, though, if you're interested, or if you just want to build your Excel skills after the course is over or between sessions. Finding out those what those different paste options do, because some of them are pretty handy. But what it does in this case, because I'm copying and pasting a formula, what it's going to do is actually rewrite my formula just a little bit on each row. So you'll notice this is my original formula, B3, C3, and D2. If I go down here, I now get B4, C4, and D3 in cell D4. In D5, I get B5, C5, and D4, et cetera, all the way down, so that the last version of it for December is B13, C13, and D12. So this helps me keep a running balance all the way down. It's just the way that it's doing this is it's just looking at where the formula lives and where the formulas are, where the formula lives and where the formula is, and where the cell is that you're pasting it into. So this cell is 1 row down, so it's just going to add 1 to all the row numbers. This cell is I guess 5 rows down, so it's going to add 5 to all the row numbers, and so on and so forth. If I pasted something over here, then it would change it would shift the column letters over 2 columns. So D becomes F, C becomes E, B becomes D, and so on. So that's all it's doing, but that's really helpful because then I don't have to rewrite this formula for each row as I go down. Life's too short for that. Speaking of things that life's too short for, oops, cancel. I wrote January, February, and March over here, and then I stopped. There's a really handy thing that I can do to fill out the rest of this. Instead of coming down here and writing April and then May and then June, I can instead select these cells. So I'm going to click in the middle of cell A2, and I'm going to drag my mouse down. So hold down on the mouse button and drag it down until I get all 3 of these cells selected, A2, A3, and A4. There's a little dot in the bottom left corner here. It's a little hard to see maybe, but it's just in the bottom right corner of this selection. There's a little dot there. When I move my mouse over it, you'll notice I kind of have this block plus sign here. If I move my mouse over it, it turns into just black lines as a plus sign. I'm going to click on this dot and hold down. And I'm going to drag down until I get row 13 or cell A13 selected. And then I'm going to let go of my mouse button. When I do that, I get April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So I didn't have to write all that out. Super handy. What this is a feature that Excel has called AutoFill. And AutoFill basically just looks for a pattern and tries to follow it. So another example would be if I was over here and I had 3, and then I had 6, and then I had 9, and then I select these 3 cells, go down to the little dot here in the bottom right corner of the selection, hold down on my mouse button and drag. It keeps on counting by 3s just like that. So I get 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, etc. And that's because I've given it a pattern and I've said, okay, Excel, follow this pattern. If I come up here and hit undo, that'll clear it out. I've now got, if I go 6 and 9, that will actually work okay. If I keep dragging, it will still follow the pattern of counting by threes. But there's a problem or a limitation here. If I select cell number, or if I select this cell with just the number 9 in it, and I drag down from there, I'm just going to get a whole bunch of 9s. And the reason for that is last time I selected all 3 of these cells. And so it looked at those cells to figure out what the pattern was. But when I select only the cell with the 9 in it, Excel basically thinks 9 is the pattern. And so it just gives me a bunch of 9s and fills it out there. So I have to make sure if I'm going to use AutoFill to fill out information like that, that follows a pattern, I need to select multiple cells that follow the pattern in order to give Excel the information that it needs to figure out what the pattern is. Otherwise, it's gonna ignore cells that are outside of your selection because it assumes that that's not part of the pattern. Now, one place it will follow a pattern that's really useful sometimes is actually with formulas. So rather than using copy and paste, I can actually autofill formulas as well. So if I go in and I delete these, I clear out these cells by selecting them and pressing delete. If I select just this one cell with a formula in it, and I click on the dot and drag it down, then it actually does the same thing as I got when I used copy and paste. Copy and paste is useful for different scenarios, so I definitely wanted to show you that. But this is a quick and easy way to get Excel to follow a pattern with formulas. So you can select the cell, drag down from the little dot in the corner, and it will fill out the cells with a version of the formula that changes those row numbers or changes the column letters if you drag the dot over to the side. So that's really handy. And in fact, there's one other way I can do this. I'm going to delete these one more time, click on the cell with $85 in it, and then I'm going to double click on the dot here. When I double click, it actually autofills it all the way down without me even having to drag. This is called flash fill. And what it does is it looks for where there's data next to the cells that it's filling out. It goes down as far as it can until it finds, oh, there's no data over here. And then it stops. So that automatically fills in the rows where there's a blank, where there's a blank cell, but there's data next to it. So that's a really handy way to quickly fill in a version of the form of your formulas. And of course, the reason that I hold off on this and don't talk about copy and paste in the first session is because you need some understanding of the way formulas work and like the cell addresses and things like that in order to know what this is doing and be able to use it effectively. All right. Let's go ahead and move over to this breakout sessions sheet there. If you have questions, again, just let me know anytime. You don't have to wait for me to ask about it. And so if you have questions, just shoot them in and we'll tackle them. All right, let's go ahead and click on this breakout sessions sheet though, and let's talk about absolutes and names. So, okay. On this sheet, I've got, let's say I'm hosting some sort of professional conference and we have some breakout sessions. And there's one about time management. There's one about computer tips. There's a marketing session and there's an Excel session. They're supposed to last an hour and 30 minutes. And so I've used a formula here in cell C2 to calculate the end time based on the start time. So I've got 9 a.m. here. And what Excel is doing is, again, because you can add time just like you would and subtract time just like you would any other number, Excel takes 9 a.m., adds an hour and 30 minutes, and gives me 10:30 a.m. B2 plus E3. And then, and that's how my formula works here. If I want, so I want to use a version of this formula on these other rows that will fill in the correct end time for those sessions. what I'm going to do, I'll come up here and I'll just drag the dot down and autofill the formula on in. But now I have a problem, 10 a.m. and 10 a.m. So we're only going to get 1 minute of PC tips, marketing, and Excel. That's probably not what we want. And if you look at the formula, you can see what went wrong here. It kind of broke. And that was because the original formula is B2 and E3. If I go down here, it added 1 to the row number, just like we saw on the other sheet. So now I have, instead of B2 and E3, I have B3 and E4. But if I look at cell E4, there's nothing there. And same deal with these. It actually moved down to E5 here and E6 down here. So what I need to do is I need to write a version of this original formula that can copy down here. Now I could go in and rewrite the formula on each row, but if I had a lot of rows of data, obviously that would get to be a hassle. So I don't want to do that. I want to be able to write a version of this formula and then copy and paste or autofill it to the rest of these cells. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these. And then I'm going to select cell C2 again, and I'm going to edit this formula just a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and click in between my E and my 3 in cell E3 there. And I'm going to put a $sign. So it'll say, so it'll be sum, open parentheses, B2, comma, E $3, close parentheses. When I hit the check mark, I can now double click the little dot again, and I get a working version of the formula. And you'll notice when I look at each of these cells, I get B3 here, B2 here, B4 here, but I always get E $3. And the reason for that is when I put the $sign in front of the row number, it makes that row number reference absolute, is what we say. So basically, what I'm telling Excel by putting the $sign in front of the 3 is, I don't want you to change that row number at all. If I copy and paste this somewhere else, I need that row number to still be the same. And so when I autofill or copy and paste it down here, it leaves the row number alone, where it normally would add 1 to the row number because I'm going down a row, or add 2 to a row number on this row, et cetera, et cetera. So it leaves that alone. It makes that 3 row number reference absolute. If I wanted to make sure that it wouldn't change columns when I copied and pasted the formula elsewhere, I could also put a $sign in front of the E. And that would make both the E and the 3 absolute. Whoops. So that I could then copy and paste it into a different column as well and still be pointing to that same cell E3. So you'll see these $signs a fair bit when we're working with Excel, particularly next week and, and on from there. So I wanted you to get used to just seeing this, but I also wanted you to know why it's helpful and why it's there. It makes basically whatever follows that $sign in terms of a row number or a column letter, it will leave those references alone. It'll make them absolute rather than relative, as we say, so that they won't change when you copy and paste the formula around. Someone asked, why is the little triangle in the cell? The triangle was in the cell when I changed it. I can make that happen again. Because what it's telling me there, if I click on the cell, I'll get this little error message looking thing. I click on that, then I can see it says inconsistent formula. What that's telling me is that the formulas around this cell are different in a way that essentially breaks a pattern. So it's noticed now that this one is $E $3. This one is $E $3, but this one in the middle is E $3. So I made them inconsistent with each other. And if I add the $sign back, then the little triangle goes away. So it's just telling you that it looks like there's a pattern, but that particular formula may be breaking it. So that's why it does that, just to warn you that there might be something wrong here. That's pretty handy. Good question. So there's one other way that I could do this that's actually a little friendlier. What I'm going to do is rather than or is if I wanted to, rather than having this be $E $3 or even $3, what I can do is come over here to cell E3 and I can actually name this cell. Now we mostly ignored the little name box over here at the top corner next to the formula bar, but I want to draw your attention to it again. Normally, if we click around in these different cells, then it will show us just the address of that cell. This cell is B7, for example. But what I want to do, I'll select cell E3 and I actually want to click here where it says E3, hit backspace or delete on my keyboard. And then I'm just going to type the word length in here, LENGTH. And I'm going to press enter on my keyboard. When I do that, so I get the word length right there in the name box. And you'll notice if I click all around, I get the same thing that I had before. But if I click here on cell E3 specifically, it says length. If I go over here to my formula in C2 and I edit it and get rid of $E $3, and I instead say after the comma, just length and close my parentheses, when I press enter, the formula works exactly the same. And if I double click on the dot and autofill, it works exactly the same there. So what I can do here is I can name cells, or I can even name ranges of cells if I select a whole bunch of them and go up here and change the name in the name box. But I can name cells or ranges, and then I can just use that word when I'm writing the formula rather than the address of the cell like E3 or G7 or whatever. And that way, I can more easily see, or I can more easily read what's going on in my formulas, which makes a big difference, particularly if you haven't worked with a formula for a while and you're coming back to the sheet and you're looking at it again going, oh, I need to change this formula, but I don't remember what all I did here, what all this, what all these functions are and so forth. That'll help you know, like, okay, I'm taking B2. Okay, that's the start time, and I'm adding length. Oh yeah, right over here, the length of the thing. And it also serves as an absolute reference. So anywhere that I copy and paste this formula, it's going to change this B2, but it won't change where it says length. That will remain pointing to E3. And in fact, it'll work on other sheets as well. It's a kind of a pain to reference cells on other sheets using their addresses. You have to like type the name of the sheet, put it in apostrophes, like kind of as though they were quotation marks. You might need at least for some sheet names, you might need you'll need an exclamation point, and then you write the name of the address of the cell or the address of the range. Here, anywhere, any sheet inside this entire example file, if I type length into a formula, Excel is going to go, oh, that's right, cell E3 on the breakout sessions sheet. So that's really, really handy. All right, let's go ahead and keep moving. I'm gonna, again, if you have questions, just let me know, but I am gonna keep pressing forward since we're running a little low on time and I wanna make sure we get things squared away as timely as we can. So I'm gonna go down to this date 1 sheet. Again, make sure you're not editing any formulas. You can press escape on your keyboard to be super certain that you're not. And I'm gonna click on the date 1 sheet here. Okay, so in this example, here's what we've got. We've got, in this example, I'm working as some sort of a freelance jack of all trades, basically. And I'm using a spreadsheet to keep track of my various assignments from different clients and remind myself what I'm working on for them and so on. So I've got the name of the client, the date I received the assignment, the number of days the assignment is old. In other words, how long ago did I get this? And then the description. But of course, I don't have the number of days old here. I want Excel to calculate that for me using a formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select cell C2. I'm going to come up to the formula bar, click there. I'm going to hit the equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And I'm going to use our old friend, the sum function once again. So I'm going to type SUM for sum, and open a set of parentheses there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit I'm going to throw in a negative here. So I'm going to go negative B2. So that's the date I received the assignment. I'll put a comma. And then I'm going to throw in a new function, which is the today function. I'm just going to type the word today, open a set of parentheses, and then close them right away. Nothing in between the parentheses, not even a space, just today, left parenthesis, right parenthesis. And then I'm going to close up the original parenthesis that go with the sum function right here. So I have negative B2, comma, today, left parenthesis, right parenthesis, right parenthesis. I'll hit enter or click the check mark or whatever. And now I get 56. This assignment I received 56 days ago on January 21st, 2021. The reason that this works is, well, a couple of things. One, as I mentioned last week and actually earlier, with dates and times, Excel can add and subtract them just like it does any other number. So I can take today's date, for example, and I can subtract June 21st, 2021, and I'll get 56 because that's the number of days between those two dates. That's exactly what's happening up here. The today function just fills in today's date, whatever today happens to be. In this case, today, of course, is August 16th, 2021. So January 21st, 2021 was 56 days ago. The reason that the today function is written this way is because it's a function, you have to have the parentheses. Otherwise, Excel just treats it like any old text. So the word today, basically. So the parentheses tell Excel that that the word today is actually meant to be a function. But you don't need anything inside the parentheses because your computer has a clock and it keeps track of the date. So it knows what today is. It just uses your computer clock. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see like the date and the time. It's just using that to figure out what today's date is. And it's throwing that into the formula. So I have negative B2 plus today. I'm subtracting the date I received the assignment from today's date. And that gives me 56 days. If I go over here to the little dot in the corner of cell C2 and I double click, again, it's going to autofill this down. So I've got one assignment I received today. That's got a 0. This one I received 56 days ago. This one I received 258 days ago, back on December 1st of last year. So I probably need to jump on this one. And I can even sort and filter. So I'll come up here, click the little drop-down arrow next to number of days old. And I will click on sort largest to smallest. That puts the assignments I've had for a long time at the top and the assignments I've had for shorter times down at the bottom. Someone's asking whether the formulas are written down somewhere. Yes. If you go to that link that I dropped in the chat earlier and that I had on screen before the class started, there's a handout and you can download the handout. That serves as a nice little cheat sheet for you. And it does have all of these formulas listed out there. In fact, I'm referring to the handout while I'm teaching so that I get the formulas exactly right as well. So yeah, that is, it's way up here somewhere. cals.link/excel-2-files. Drop that in the chat again. There we go. So yeah, download the handout there and you'll find the formulas as well. Good question. Thank you for checking on that. Okay, so let's go to this date 2 sheet as well. On the date 2 sheet, I'm doing something slightly different. So I'm still keeping track of my assignments from these different clients. But instead of the number of days I've had the assignment, what I want to calculate in column C here is the number of days I have left until the due date, which is what's listed now in column B, rather than the number of days the assignment is old. So this assignment, for example, is due July 20th, 2021. Oop, that's a little overdue. Oh boy. Okay. So let's figure out what's overdue, what's not due yet, and try to prioritize our assignments here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select cell C2 again in this sheet. I'm going to come up here to the top, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. But this time, rather than just calculating the number of calendar days like I did on the last sheet, I actually want to set myself up for success here by not overestimating the amount of time I have left. Because even with something like, oh, let's say this one's not due until December 30th. But if I think about the number of days between now and December 30th, I've got their weekend days where I won't be working on the assignment. And there are some holidays where I won't be working on the assignment either. So if I just look at the number of calendar days between now and then, I might think I actually have more time than I do. And so I want to be a little more accurate with my calculations here. So I'm going to use a new function called net work days. So I'm going to type net work days, all one word, not network days, but net work days. But it is all one word listed out there. And then I'm going to open a set of parentheses, Shift 9. And I'm being prompted for 3 arguments here by my hint system. The first 2 are required. We have to have a start date and an end date. And then there's a third argument, holidays, which is in square brackets. So I know that that's optional. And in fact, in this case, I'm going to skip over that. But I'll tell you what it does here in a second. So our start date is going to be essentially the earlier date, whatever that is. And that's today. So I'm going to put the today function back in there, open a set of parentheses, close them right back. And I'm going to put a comma outside the parentheses. So my first argument is the start date is today. And then you'll notice again, my end date goes bold because that's the argument that I'm working on now. So for the end date, of course, that's going to be the due date for the assignment. So on this row, that's going to be B2. And it color codes for me, so I know I'm pointing to the right one. Then I'm going to close my parentheses because I'm not using that optional holidays argument. I'll hit enter on my keyboard and it's going to tell me, oh, -20. So I'm 20 work days overdue on this particular assignment from the client. If I come over here and double click on the little dots in the corner or dot in the corner there, then it's going to autofill the rest in. So I've got one more assignment that I'm overdue on. This one I'm only 6 work days overdue on. This one I've got 8 work days left before it's due. This one 15, this one 15, 22. And so I can sort these out. The best way to go, of course, probably would be smallest to largest. So I can put the overdue assignments at the top, and then I can come down here, and then I can see the rest of the assignments that are not due for a little while. So the network, so that third optional argument, holidays, that's in square brackets there. If I added a comma, and then I put in the address of a range of cells, in those cells, I can put the dates of holidays that I'm going to be off. Now, by default, Excel doesn't have like a list of holidays or anything like that. It's not keeping track of that. Excuse me. So you do have to fill that in manually. So if I wanted to say, or if I'm going to be off Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, President's Day, whatever, I would need to fill in the actual dates of each of those holidays that I'd be off. But then once I put in that range, so if I put it over here in column G, and I went from say G2 on down to G12 or something, then I could fill in that range, G2 to G12, as my holidays argument. So I'd go B2, comma, G2 to G12. And then it would skip over those days when it did its calculations. So, for example, with this one, you'd have a lower number because there are less actual work days since you're skipping over those holidays and you're not doing work on those days. So you do have to list your holidays manually, but that's really convenient in figuring out how much time you actually have to work on an assignment or how long it's going to actually take, a package to ship that's, that is going to be delivered on a weekday or whatever. So that's net work days. All right, let's go ahead and shift to the last sheet here, the sales charts sheet. On this sheet, we are going to make a chart. Yay. Okay, so what I've got for this example is I have 5 salespeople, and I'm tracking their sales numbers, number of units sold or whatever, from the first quarter of year 1 to the fourth quarter of year 2. So I've got those 8 different quarters of sales numbers listed out there. So what I need to do here in this sheet is I need to, I want to represent this visually because it's kind of hard to see whether there's a trend or if somebody's numbers are kind of going down or going up or whatever. I want to be able to see that. And rather than looking at a bazillion numbers, it's a lot easier to look at that visually or communicate it visually to someone else, like a supervisor or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I've got cell A1 selected. I'm going to click in the middle of it and I'm going to drag until I get down to cell I6 here. So I need A1 through I6. I do want my row headings and my column headings and my row labels selected here. So make sure you get all of these cells. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the top, click on Insert, and I'm going to click on Recommended Charts up here. When I click on that, I get this Insert Chart dialog box, and I get a bunch of options here. So I get 6 kinds of charts that are, 6 kinds of charts that are recommended to me here. The clustered column chart, the stacked column chart, the clustered bar chart, stacked bar chart, the funnel chart, and the Pareto chart. Interesting. So I don't want any of these. So instead of one of these suggested charts, what I'm going to do is click on all charts. And then I can see a bunch of different options of types of charts that I could choose. Column charts, line charts, bar charts, radar charts, the tree map, the sunburst, all sorts of things. So we're not going to get into what all these are, but for each set of, or each general chart type, I'm going to use a line chart this time. For each chart type, you've got 2 different versions of the sort of OG line chart here. So I've got this version of the line chart, which each line on the chart represents a salesperson, and it kind of shows how their numbers are fluctuating over time. And then the vertical axis here shows the number of units sold from 0 to 1200 or whatever. And each stop on this chart is a given quarter. The other version of this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Each line is a quarter, and then each stop on the chart is a salesperson. So that's a little weird. We definitely want this version of the chart, which is what we're going to use ultimately. But we have other versions of a line chart, a stacked line chart, which shows all the lines stacked up on top of each other to give you like totals. We've got the 100% chart. So this is basically showing you what percentage each person's sales numbers were of the overall take that quarter. And then you've got essentially variations of those same things, but with markers for each stop on the in the lines, basically. And you have a 3D version of a line chart, which looks like a nightmare to read. And so there are a bunch of different, so there are general chart types, there are variations, and then there are sort of configurations of those variations. So you can really dig in here and get exactly the sort of chart that you want to represent your data. So I'm going to pick this first version of a line chart, come down here and use this variation that where each line is a different salesperson. I'll click OK. And there we go. So now I get a big old chart here with which just says chart title. So I'm going to click there first and edit this. I'm going to change it to sales numbers. And then very important, don't press enter when you're typing that. Just click outside of the name of the chart once you've typed in the correct name, because otherwise it's going to deselect your chart and move around on the sheet itself. So just click somewhere else in the chart and make sure the chart is still selected. You should see little dots around it. If the chart's not still selected, then you won't see the little dots and you won't be able to interact with it very much. When the chart is selected, you'll see two additional tabs up at the top, the chart design tab and the chart format tab here. The format tab is going to do things like change your colors and your fonts and stuff like that. The chart design tab here is going to make has some different themes that you can choose from. So you can kind of get this sort of gradient in the background with these big dots. You can get like this cross hatching here. My personal favorite is down here, the laser tag look, like this one. It does have these little labels, but we'll tweak that in a sec. And you can do things like switching the rows and columns with this button here. Selecting data. So if you accidentally didn't get all your data when you were selecting the source data for the chart, you can click select data and change that. You can change the type of chart. You can move the chart somewhere else, like to a different sheet or its own sheet, and so on and so forth. Down here, so we can see our data clearly. If I look at, well, kind of clearly, these little labels are really getting in the way. So I'm going to tweak that a bit. What I'm going to do is click this plus sign right here. This is the chart elements button. When I click here, you'll notice it says data labels, and that is checked. I'm going to click the checkbox next to data labels to dismiss those. So now this is a little more readable. If I click the arrow next to that, I could add data labels of various types, like ones that are centered directly on each bend in the line, ones that are to the left of the data points, ones that are to the right of the data points, above them, below them, whatever. You can use a call out box, which makes it really cluttered. But I'm just gonna make sure that it's not checked because it looks a little cleaner this way. I could change whether the axes of the chart show. So if I uncheck this, then my numbers go away and my quarters go away down here. I could get error bars if I'm working with statistical information. I can get a copy of the table that the source data comes from down at the bottom. Whoops. I can add or remove the title of the chart by unchecking this or checking it, and so on and so forth. So you can do you can make a lot of individual tweaks to how the data is displayed in your chart. If I click this little paintbrush, that does the same thing as what we did up top. You can change to a different style here. You can also change your color scheme by clicking this color tab. And finally, over here is this funnel, the filter button. If I click on that, let's say, for example, that Helen has left the company. I'm going to uncheck the box next to her name. When I do, and I click apply, then the gray line that represented Helen's data goes away. And I can now see just the salespeople that are still with the company and focus on their performance rather than worrying about someone who's no longer with the company. I could also, so I'll check that to get her data back in a sec. But again, I'm going to have to hit apply to make that happen. Let's say I want to focus on just year one. I'm going to uncheck the year two boxes down here under categories and click apply. And now I just get the year one sales numbers. And when I move my mouse over this, you'll notice that I can still see the values of the data points just by moving my mouse over them. So right here, this point on the yellow line is Lesham year one, quarter three, and the value is 898. So Lesham sold 898 units that quarter. So anytime you make changes to these filters, you do have to click apply before it will happen. So make sure that you do that. Over here under names, because we don't have a super complicated chart, we don't really need to mess with this, but you can change some of the way things are laid out and what represents what by tweaking these options if you need to, if your data is not being displayed in the correct way. And that is pretty much it. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap it up? All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me today. Just I um we've had a couple problems with the Zoom events listing the wrong times. I went through this morning and double checked, so we shouldn't have that problem anymore. Again, if you want to circle back and refresh your memory before next week's session at some point, you can see the recording of this on the YouTube channel. And the easiest way to get to that is to head to cals.link/YouTube. Super duper easy. Um, and um, and there should be less kind of if you did go back and rewatch last week's video, or if you watched last week's video because you couldn't make it to last week's session, there's a lot of like extra kind of playing music and showing the title graphic. That there's not as much of that this time, so that should make things a little easier. And and then of course, you can download the handout, you can re-download the example file if you want to. If you go to that link, by the way, where you get the example files and the handouts, over on the right-hand side, you can also click on the other parts and see, and download those ahead of time. Or again, if you have changed your copy or deleted your copy or whatever, so you can continue to play around with that. And I hope, or next week. So next week we'll be talking about things like color coding your cells, protecting your information from accidental or malicious edits, doing what's called data validation, and just kind of cleaning things up in general to make sure that your data looks good and is readable and is actually correct and stuff. We'll talk about how to remove duplicates super easily. And we'll talk about logical functions, which are really, really useful, and take your formulas to a whole different level. So I hope that you'll have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next week. Have a great one.